Something I was told growing up in the South always kinda irked me. When winter would come around, I would be really enamored by the snow and the winter weather and the coldness. Something about it just made me feel so alive. The problem was we didn't get a lot of that in the part of Tennessee where I lived. It would only be a couple days out of the year, and some of those days would have a lot of snow, but in general, it wasn't a whole lot. It was generally just cold and rain, which I really liked in its own right. It would hail sometimes, and you'd have these shards of ice falling from the sky. And I remember one time my stepbrother was riding down a hill as these shards of hail were just slamming at him, and he told the story in such a larger-than-life way when he got home. I had to have been 6 or 7 years old listening to him go on about this. And so it was usually icy rain near the wintertime. The couple times we would get snow, sometimes it would be a lot, but in general it wasn't that much. But I always said to my parents when that cold weather would come around how much I loved the cold and the snow and the rain, but especially the snow. And the response I always got from my father, who was from California, would be, well, sure, you like it part of the time, but you wouldn't want to have to drive in it, and you also wouldn't want to have it around all the time. Now, I disagreed with him when I heard that. Something inside of me just knew that he was wrong. And then, years and years later, I moved around a bit, and I actually stayed long-term in places that caught a lot of snow. And I came to find out that younger me was right. Not only did I enjoy having to shovel the snow in the driveway, I also even found enjoyment in driving in the snow. Yes, you heard that correctly. I enjoy the act of driving in the snow. Now, I've only ever done this unlicensed because I do not currently possess a driver's license, but it is something that I've done, and done successfully, mind you. The mechanics of doing that, the skill involved in that, it's all something that, from a maneuvering standpoint and from the standpoint of a skill that you're pursuing, is pretty fucking cool. But even without the added difficulty that is inevitably there when you're driving in the snow, the fact that there's all this white beauty that never gets old right out the window as you're driving for you to enjoy, scenery to partake in, it's a nice picture. It's a nice sight. I gotta say, it's beautiful. And it doesn't tire. It does not get old. I remember the first really snowy place that I lived in for an extended period of time was Caribou, Maine. Up there in northern Maine, Aroostook County. It's basically Canada up there, right on the border with New Brunswick. It's about an hour away from the border, something like that. And I remember we caught the first snow there in October, and a little further out, it started to be minus 40 Fahrenheit. Let me repeat that. Minus 40 Fahrenheit at nighttime. And for those of you who are on metric, minus 40 is the same in metric as it is in the imperial system. So that's minus 40 Celsius. And that's what it would be at nighttime getting this snow. And I found that to be completely and utterly exhilarating. When I'd go out there with all my gear on, I would be mostly warm, but in that kind of weather, you are inevitably going to feel the cold. Your face starts to freeze in that kind of weather. And something about it was just so exhilarating. And the years have gone by since I was 16 living in that place, and I've lived in other places that are close by or far away that nonetheless get that kind of weather and get that kind of snow, and I've lived there long term. And that never really wore off. That exhilarating feeling of feeling alive, feeling like your body has been turned up a little bit, and that all of this that's happening inside of you actually turns your brain on. Like, it's this weird feeling I get where my body is hit with the cold, even with all that gear on. Like I said, it's hit with the cold, and I feel almost like my brain is doing extra work, like it's woken up. And then I look out at the mass of beauty in front of me, and I'm just like, holy shit, this is an absolutely wonderful world that we live in, isn't it? That's how I feel. And when I'm out with my fiance, who's Canadian, who has been in this kind of weather her whole life, who is older than me, she has the exact same reaction as I do. And it makes me feel like, oh, I'm not insane. I'm not nuts. This is just an aesthetic preference that I have that's also a preference in terms of how I like to feel. It makes me feel a particular way to be in that kind of weather. And dare I say, this is like a natural response from me. When I'm in that kind of weather, those kinds of places, I truly feel like I am in my natural environment. Like that is where I was meant to be. And by being in the hot as hell South, by the way, I'm really, really sensitive to heat. I'm not so sensitive to the cold. The cold I can take quite a lot of without needing that much gear, but when I'm in the heat, it fucking kills me. I get sick as a dog in the heat to the point where, like, I'm essentially incapacitated, incapable of doing anything. I am just on the ground begging for mercy. I cannot handle the heat. But the cold, I can do with. Even when I don't have that much gear and I have to face being, like, actually chilled, I can do with it. And the thing is, though, I don't necessarily have to do with it if I don't want to. You can always put on more layers, you can always put on more gear, but the heat, you just kind of have to deal with. Like, it's just gonna make you feel sick and bad if you're like me, and so why the fuck would you want to be out in it? What, you can take most of your clothes off, okay, your skin is showing and now you need sunscreen, and it's still not mitigating most of the bad effects of the heat. You're sitting there, like, desperately trying to do what you're supposed to do, and the moment that you get outside, there's no air conditioner to help you, you know? So I can't go on my walks or my runs, and inside the air conditioner has to be fucking blasting just to feel a modicum of comfort that goes away straight the moment that you get straight out that door. And what if the AC breaks in your car? The one thing that's keeping you kind of okay on the way to wherever you have to go. And that's also kind of forcing you to use a car in the first place, being in that kind of weather, just to have refuge from the onslaught of heat. I refuse. No, I refuse to be in that kind of weather, because at least if I can put a bunch of coats on, shirts on, layers, etc., then I can be all right. I can walk wherever the hell I want to go and be relatively fine. I cannot do that in the heat. I will feel like I'm ready to die. Lay down right there, ready to die. So yeah, it's partly a practical thing where my body just does not bode well with the heat. I break down. And I'm also a little bit more naturally, maybe genetically acclimated to the cold, where I feel like I hate this term warm-blooded because I don't know if it's scientific. I've never actually looked into it. It sounds like it's one of those made-up, like, intuitive things that everybody repeats, but I literally feel like I'm warm-blooded because I can take so much of the cold with minimal preparation. I remember I was walking around Vermont in the wintertime with her, and she had all these coats on and everything else. I just had my hoodie, and I was, like, relatively fine. I didn't feel a chill. I had to put my hands in my pockets, sure, but I felt fine. And that, to me, is the difference between cold and warm-blooded, because I felt fine. I felt a little exhilarated by the cold, you know, kind of tinged by it. But in general, like, I was fine just in that hoodie and those jeans. I had my boots on. My boots are pretty damn warm, but that's it. And maybe somebody else, they would feel like they're freezing even with a lot of stuff on. So that could be a natural advantage I have over some people, and that could contribute to why I have this particular preference. And then my sense of beauty and aesthetics, the way that I internalize beautiful things, has a lot to do with it, because I am certainly a very aesthetic-driven person. I like to see beautiful things, and often I do not tire of beautiful things. When I see them, I want to see them more and again. I don't get tired of them. So when I see the snow in a million different ways, in a million different settings, it never ceases to be beautiful to me, especially because, like, we get varied weather. So even if you live in a place where about half of the year is winter, essentially, you're still going to have the other half be those other seasons. And so you get breathing room. It's not like it's like that all the time. And then the moment that it is like that, again, most of the time, it's really pretty for that most of the time. So I like sustained, beautiful things that are regular, that you continue seeing. I don't tire of them. But at the same time, with something like weather, it's just going to change. Like it's going to be different enough of the time that it remains novel no matter how many times you end up seeing it, because that's the whole point. It's a big circle of seasons. There's something really intuitive here that I am not getting at, that it feels like I'm almost incapable of describing, that at the very core of my being, I feel as though I were meant to live in a snowy, barren wasteland, someplace that's remote, a lot of forest, just cold. Those are my favorite places in the United States, and those are my favorite places in the world. Like, if I could live in just a barren, frozen shithole with a lot of nature around that I could regularly see, I think I would die a happy man, for certain. I would be in my natural environment. And that's exactly how I felt every time I've stayed for an extended period of time in a place like that. Like, I'm in my natural environment. And I can sit here and pontificate on the question and try to make sense of it and try to put it into words. But the one thing that I can kind of laugh about is the fact that those people who were older than me consistently told me, no, you're wrong, you're not going to feel this way in the future, just go experience it for real, you'll feel exactly like me. And then I went and experienced it for real for years and did not have the exact same experience as them. So jokes on those people for not believing me when I was younger. But I knew I was right then, and I know that I'm right now. So you can suck a dick. But yeah, it seems like no matter how much I try to articulate this, I end up saying really like airy and vague statements like, it's my natural habitat, or that's where I feel the most alive, or it's exhilarating, or I feel the most like myself. Like, just kind of saying the same statements in slightly different ways. That's how it feels to me. And, I can say I'm a really aesthetics-driven person. That's certainly a part of it. I love beauty. I love seeing it. I love being in it. I want to see it all the time. But that's only one part of the story. Sure, I have very intense reactions to those things, but there's something deeper here that perhaps just is literally genetic. Like, perhaps the fact that I am a white person contributes to this narrative that I'm weaving here, where I don't need as much vitamin D as people from other genetic backgrounds. I have that Germanic DNA to be able to live in very cold, barren places for long periods of time. That could just literally be what it is. But whatever it is, I know where I'm happy, and I know where I like to be. And all of my goals seem to point directly in the direction of being in a place like that long term.